Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to make over some items and we're going to do it in a faith theme. And I thrifted this little box and it almost looks like a Bible box. It may be, I'm not sure. You usually don't see them without the word Bible on them. But that's what I'm going to make this one over for, just to put some Bible study materials in. And I'm going to start out by painting it with 2 coats of the color drop cloth, and that's a Dixie Belle color. Now I thought about just antiquing those shiny brass hinges, but in the end I just decided to go ahead and paint them the same color. I think I like them better that way. So I just painted everything with the 2 coats, including the inside of the lid and the bottom. So everything except the inside of the box, which was the green crushed velvet, and I think I can make that work. Now I'm going to be using some scripture stencils and even some scripture stamps in this video, and I'll make sure and link as many of those as I can find in the description. I mentioned a couple of videos back that I'm trying a lot harder to make the links more accessible. So hopefully that'll make it much easier for you guys to find the materials that I use. So if you haven't decoupaged with napkins, if you've watched me long, I'm sure you have, but you remove all the layers except for the one layer that has the image on it. And with this one I removed 2 layers, and most napkins you'll remove 2 layers. Some will only have 1 to remove, but if you don't get all the extra layers removed, then you'll not have very much luck trying to decoupage it on. It'll try to pull apart and it just won't lay down right at all. So make sure you remove those, and I do it by just taking a piece of tape and sticking it on the back corner of the napkin, and it will pull the back layer off, and then do it again to see if it pulls another one off. Now I'm just tearing out some of these roses and decoupaging them on here. And I have a stencil that I'm going to be using. I'm going to use some scripture in this one, as I mentioned before. And the scripture that I'm going to put in the center of this one, I make sure that I hold it up to the box as I start to add each of these images, to make sure that these images don't get in the way of the stencil that I'm going to be adding. I could have stenciled it on first, and probably should have. That would have been much easier. But I just kind of hold it up and make sure every now and then before I add. Now this napkin I got from Amazon, and again I will link that in the description. I know that I can find this one. And this stencil I just actually ordered a set of scripture stencils. And they're all this 12 by 12 size, and so I'll link that in the description also. I think that there's about 12 of these. So once this dries, I just take some sandpaper and just kind of lightly sand around the edges to clean those up, and that will remove any of the excess and also neaten up your edges. And then I'm just going to add that stencil to the front. And I'm just going to do it in black, but I have an ink pad that needs to be refilled with ink. So I'm purposely using that one and not refilling it, because I don't want this to be very, very dark. I don't want it to be too harsh. So I put some clear wax on this, and then I put some of the Van Dyke Brown Glaze. Both of these are Dixie Belle products. You could use any kind of clear wax that you want, but I like to use the clear wax first so that I can more easily remove the excess glaze, because if you don't do some sort of finish on it first, that chalk paint will just accept everything, and you don't want that. You want to have more control over what you can wipe away. And because this is supposed to be shaped like a book, I need the pages to look like book pages. So I'm just taking a brush and applying some bronze gilding wax on all the sides, and then I'll lightly go over that with some gold gilding wax just to kind of highlight it and give it some depth of color. You're probably hearing some extra sounds because I am doing my voiceover outside again. But here is what this looked like when it was finished. And now for the next item, I purchased, or actually my sister purchased some of these. I think they're 12 by 12 wood pieces that are framed at the Dollar Tree. And I think this was in the $3 aisle. And so it makes a good base for a sign, and I'm just going to go over the whole thing with 2 coats of the color Buttercream. And then once I get this covered completely and it's dry, then I'm going to add a stencil to this. I'm also going to be adding some napkins to this with some roses on it. So I am using some ink colors that are in the roses. I actually bought a lady out that had a stamp collection, and she had some inks, and this was a couple of colors that was in there, so that's what I'm using. I'm doing the same thing with this and just tearing out some of this after I've removed that back cover. This particular napkin I'm not going to be able to add in the description because I have looked and looked for it and haven't been able to find it. It was a gift from a sweet viewer, so it's going to work for this, but I'm not going to be able to help you find one. Just use any napkin that has roses around the edge. So I will try to look for one that has some roses around the edge that I can add as a replacement in the description, and if I can find that, I'll add that. Now I have some resin molds that I've made ahead, and if you've never done that, then you just use what I first used. My friend Myra introduced me to Amazing Resin, and I just love using it, but there's not a whole lot in it, so I wanted to be able to buy it more in bulk, and I found another brand of resin, and I will add that in the description if you want to buy it in bulk, because it's not the cheapest, but when you buy it in bulk, it goes a lot longer, so a lot further rather. So, but you could start out with the Amazing Resin. I think you can get it for like 20 bucks or under. And these are all the molds that I had made ahead. And that's the great thing about using the resin, is you could make them ahead and just have several of them and just kind of pull out what you need as long as it's going on a flat surface. Now these little birds are from I think it's called Bird Song, and that's an IOD mold, and so I will add that in the description. And the little roses are a little trim mold, and I will add those in the description. And then the roses in the corner, that's probably my very favorite mold that I have. And it's a little resin mold that is silicone. And it comes in a little set. So I will add that in the description. But I just love the detail of those roses in the corner. And I think that that really brings this out. So what I'm doing here is I have painted all the molds in the color Buttercream, and I just did that after I glued them on. I glued them on with Type Bond glue. I like to use the Quick and Thick because it holds quicker. It's not as easy to slide actually. And now I'm going over the birds. I just kind of dry brush some white over the top of them to give them a little more dimension. And now I'm just adding a little bit of pink, and I have mixed tea rose and the color tea rose and the color Buttercream to make this more muted rose color. And so I'm going over all these roses, and I'm not worrying about full coverage at all. I'm just adding quite a bit of the color to each of them. And you'll see some of the buttercream, and you'll see some of the rose. And after I go over all those roses, then I'm using some green and going over just the little, all of the little leaves. And as you can see, I added that extra stencil on the bottom. And now I felt like my birds needed some more dimension. So I've already clear coated everything. I just took this outside and sprayed a good clear coat over it. I wouldn't dare try to do this glaze without clear coating it first, because I could mess up my whole thing just trying to get these birds worked out. But I'm just going over them with a little bit of that glaze, and then I just kind of wipe off the excess with a wet wipe. But after I did all this, and I will say this is not one that you're probably going to make much money on. I'm actually doing this for my daughter's room, and so I don't mind taking some extra steps to it, and I'm not worried about getting my money back. So that's why I was able to add all those molds. And but I just love how it turned out. I think that putting the color on those rose molds really helped. Now, I thrifted this little box. I love the rose color on the inside, so I'm going to kind of work with that. And I'm going to paint the outside of this in a mixture of tea rose and rebel yellow. That's the same color that I used on those little roses. And I mixed them half and half. And I'm going to take all these little handles off, and then I'm going to paint 2 coats of the color tea rose. And I'm going to paint the sides of the drawers and everything. The only thing that I'm not going to paint, obviously, is the inside that is lined. But I really needed to get these handles off first because I want to do them in a different finish. And once I get all of them off, then I just take some sandpaper and go over it, because it kind of pulled some paint off and it was kind of chippy. So I just went over that and smoothed it out with some sandpaper, and then I cleaned the whole thing really well and gave this 2 coats of the color, actually mixed color of tea rose and rebel yellow. And then once I got it painted and it dried well, then I'm going to just do some decoupage only on the drawers. So that's another reason I needed those handles off, because I don't want to have to work around them. I think I said I mixed tea rose and rebel yellow, but I was wrong. I mixed soft pink and rebel yellow. Both still are Dixie Belle colors, but 1/2 soft pink and 1/2 rebel yellow to get this color. And I generally like to put a light color underneath my decoupage, but this I felt like would work out well, just to go ahead and go over the pink drawers instead of painting them white instead. And they did. So I just decoupaged over the front, and then I sanded away once it dried. I sanded away any of the excess to neaten up the sides, and I did that with all the drawers. And then I painted the little handles with the bronze gilding wax with just a slight amount of the gold over the top, and then put those back on, and then that's all that I did to that little box. I did clear coat it afterwards. And also, because these are little drawers, generally I put some scripture on the drawers when I am doing a furniture piece, so I thought, why not put one of my little stamps on the side of these drawers. And now the last item that I'm going to do is this little dresser box, and it's going to be a very simple makeover. I'm just going to mix half kudzu and half rebel yellow. Both of those are Dixie Belle colors, and give it 2 coats of that color, let it dry well, and then go over it with the Van Dyke brown glaze. And that glaze will not only tone this green down, but it will also, the pressure that I use on it, removing the excess, will also distress down to some of this darker color on the higher parts of the detail. So I know that produce showing up in my video all of a sudden is odd, but my granddaughter Ada was at the shop today, and we have a little garden out back, and she had been out and picked some of them and handed them to me here, so I just set them over out of my way. But they love to pick from the garden, and the tomatoes are actually doing really well this year. They started out a little iffy, but they really started to pick up and do well. But here I am adding that glaze and then wiping the excess away. And I wanted quite a bit here, so I put it on pretty heavy and just kind of wiped it really hard. And I was good with that because I wanted it to move that pressure to remove some of that excess paint. I did a little bit of wet distressing first, just by taking a damp cloth and distressing it that way, and then I remembered that I was going to be adding this glaze, and then I would get some additional distress out of that. So that was all that I did to that piece, and here are all of my pieces. I think my favorite is the picture here with the roses. I just thought that turned out really pretty, but again, this is not something that would make sense to make to sell, because it would be hard to get your money back. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.